Now, as far as funds raised is concerned, 2018 was a pretty positive year for private equity across Africa, and for a couple of reasons. According to the industry group AVCA, $2.7 billion was raised for investment across the continent in 2018. That's 11% more than the year before. 2018's number is also important because it snapped a multi-year decline that started in 2016. The year before that, $4.5 billion was raised for investment by PE firms right across the continent. However, the total value of deals done in the continent last year did fall by 10.25% to about $3.5 billion. Tech is a fast-growing investment segment. It's getting a lot of attention. But between 2013 and 2018, most of the money raised by private equity firms was actually spent in a completely different sector: utilities, communication services, and energy as well. Now, Kathryn Essome is the CEO of the Africa Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. When we spoke earlier today, I started by asking her why private equity funds are wary of investing in boring, if you will, traditional infrastructure like roads and ports.
You'll see a lot of infrastructure deals in renewables, alternative energy sources. And I think that we probably leave roads and ports to, so DFIs like African Finance Corporation or Africa 50, that's part of the African Development Bank. Because if you think about the private equity industry, it's really focused on the private sector. We want to be able to kind of execute in a way that you would in any other emerging market. So you'll see a lot of infrastructure deals that can be related to renewables and power.
There was something else that also cropped up, an interesting perception gap, if I may call it that, because 33% of non-African LPs see the continent as being a lot more attractive over the next 10 years. But you compare that to 75% of LPs who are based within Africa. So it does seem that from an outsider perspective, a lot of fund managers look at Africa and say, well, I'm not really sure about whether or not I should put my money into the continent, despite the vast opportunity available. So
the survey is among institutional investors, and it shows the sort of work we need to do with what I called our friends and family. So African pension funds, African foundations, who really should be investing in the asset class in a first instance. And they're starting to. We're seeing in Nigeria, a lot of the Nigerian PFAs have the legal and regulatory authority to invest in private equity, and they've made commitments, and that's very good. Within Kenya, we've been training pension funds in Kenya for a number of years, and subsequently a number of them have made their first commitments to private equity. In Namibia, GIPF, in South Africa, even a few years ago, PIC made their first commitment to a private equity fund that was non-South Africa, but they invested in a number of, prior to that, a number of South African private equity funds. So it's really incumbent on sort of all of us to do work with the African pension funds around education, understanding the asset class, because they tend to allocate to government equities, government bonds within their country. And I can understand, an alternative asset class is very different than a listed one. Sort of understanding what the J-curve means in private equity, any potential headline risk. So I think it will come. It's a complement to a portfolio that's in just domestic bonds or domestic equity, to have some alternatives to sort of, give your portfolio a boost and diversification.
In order of attractiveness, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Cote d'Ivoire and South Africa, Morocco, Ethiopia and Ghana. These are the countries that apparently your LPs say they're really interested in. But I'm curious about the Nigeria case. Yes, it's got Africa's biggest single population in one country, but growth there has been relatively stagnant for quite a while. So what's the attractiveness in Nigeria?
Well, one wise person said, not me, that we don't invest in GDP. So the Nigeria market is very exciting. So you have a wealth of private equity fund managers. You have many entrepreneurs with fantastic ideas. Lydia Bank, Paga, for example, there are a number of them. So it's sort of like a market on the continent that cannot be missed. So you have Nigeria, you have Kenya and South Africa. And, although growth could slow, although, whatever that could be happening politically, it's still a market that, If you're a Pan-African investor, you want to find an opportunity, you want to find a local partner and be there.